and I don't know what's motivating people who have basically been dependent on a free enterprise system to get where they are today. Now, clearly, small business, medium-sized business, the kind of business that I'm involved in various ways, they do not operate that way. But there are, particularly in the media and entertainment world, major corporations who have bought into and believe that their future is going to be tied to their economic future, tied to this approach to attacking liberty and to building a more socialistic approach to providing for the needs of the American people. That is a very dangerous trend. There's no question about it.
Well,
and it's made it even worse by the way we've allowed the Congress not only to become permanent fixtures. Very few congressmen and senators, if they run for re-election, ever get defeated, and that's in large part because the federal election laws have been biased towards the incumbent.
Yeah.
And now we've even seen, and George Bush really made a major tactical error, but we've seen that the federal election law now permits an attack on political speech before each election by restricting independent advertising.
Well, Dr. Schmitt, Apollo 18 astronaut, I'm sure you've probably seen the Cyberbullying Act, and they've even got local newscasts pushing it now. The press is that bad. The Hate Crimes Act, it now says if your speech causes someone to do something violent, even if you're not calling for violence, they're going to come arrest you. And now the FBI is fluttering around saying if somebody makes a comment on a message board that's yours, we may come after you for what they said. I mean, this is really happening to people I know. Well,
that's why we've got to make a change of direction in the United States government, a drastic change. And as I say, the next election is a key turning point. The next two elections are particularly key. If the powers that are currently in Washington maintain their control through this next election and the next two elections, then I'm not sure how you turn it around.
Okay, in the 16 minutes or so we have left with you, I want to shift gears now and get into the moon. Return to the moon, and it has that really great other headline here about colonizing. In fact, guys, put that up on screen for the TV viewers, not just the radio.
I don't think use that word. I think I use settling.
Sure, that's why I wanted to put it up on the screen so I could actually. There it is. The human settlement of space, return to the moon. Tell us what that headline means for the book.
Well, the moon is the nearest place in space where human beings can homestead. The resources are there to, once established, settlements are established, the resources are there not only to support those settlements with the water and oxygen and food and other things that you need independently of the Earth, but there is one resource that's there that allows for an economy that can, through the export of that resource, to the Earth, and that's a light isotope of helium called helium-3, which is a nearly ideal fuel for fusion power generation. And so that's what the book is all about. It tries to put together in a very, very broad way the beginnings of a plan for the private sector to initiate the settlement of the moon and to provide the Earth with a major new energy resource.
Amazing. Now, just because your bio is so lengthy, in a nutshell, tell us about your career as a AAA astronaut, lunar astronaut. Tell us about that. Tell us about the missions, just in a nutshell, and then I've got some questions.
Well, my career started as a geologist, the son of a geologist, actually, in southern New Mexico, Caltech trained, and then a Harvard PhD. I did a lot of field work in Norway and Alaska, And when NASA and the National Academy of Sciences asked for volunteers for the first selection of scientists, astronauts, I thought about 10 seconds and raised my hand. And figuring that if I didn't, I'd probably regret it, and I would have, obviously. But while at Harvard, I became increasingly concerned about the direction that Harvard-trained so-called public servants were taking us, and figured that if I was that concerned, that sometime in my life I better think about getting into politics. That opportunity came after my astronaut career had essentially been completed, and I was elected to the United States Senate. Spent 6 years there learning a great deal about how sausage is made, more than most people would like to know, I think. And then in the middle of the depression of the recession of 1982, I lost my seat here in New Mexico and went into an accelerated learning experience in the private sector and free enterprise and business-related activities.
Well, that's awesome. And again, the book is Return to the Moon, available everywhere. Harrison Schmitt is our guest. How many moon missions were you involved in total?
Well, I was involved in essentially all the moon missions, but I only flew on Apollo 17, the last of the Apollo series. My involvement in other missions was multifaceted. I was primarily responsible for setting up the lunar science and field geological science training program for the pilot astronauts. I was responsible for overseeing for the astronaut office the development of various scientific experiments, the development and storage of the descent stage of the lunar module.
And you also, it said, discovered a lot of the most important rocks. Which mission put that laser up that the University of Texas contacts every few days?
What was actually deployed on the moon 3 different times, the first one by Apollo 11, as a matter of fact, 40 years ago, was a reflector. And the various observatories now shoot those reflectors, the 3 of them that were finally deployed, with laser beams, and have been able to very, very precisely determine
the distance
from the Earth to the Moon, as well as the motions of the continent.
All right, we're running down on time, and you've agreed to come back on in the future on science issues. It's just amazing having you. But I will be broiled and skewered and drawn and quartered and hung and then tanned if I don't bring this up, because we talk about hoaxes. We have this giant government hoax of global warming right now, clearly trying to get control. Now, before I ask this, I want to say I have a friend, Raymond Teague, who worked on the main mission control on repeated Apollos, ran RCA cameras, and then RCA cameras on Skylab. And I've known Raymond for 14 years, and he says the whole thing's real, none of it's faked, the whole 9 yards, and I know he's the real deal. I have other people I know being here in Texas who worked on the mission, and they say if there was any chicanery, then they were conning us too, and that's pretty darn hard to do. 40 years later, and I never really cover this issue, but I get calls every day, emails about it, TV shows everywhere. What is your take on the people more and more believing, I've seen polls as high as 30%, that aspects of the whole thing was faked?
Well, I think in a serious vein, it is another reflection on the government-run school system. That system does not teach history. There are several generations now who have come through it that have had very little exposure to American history or world history in an objective way. And it's just right now you have a population that has not learned the complexities that had to be dealt with in order to put human beings on the moon. Also, you have people who just for their own enjoyment, I guess, like to talk about conspiracies. And then finally, unfortunately, a lot of people don't trust their government anymore.
But in a way that I mean, that's a positive thing to not be totally trusting. The founders said that. I think a lot of it's so much government lying